Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me all right? Yes? Thank you. It was suggested this morning that because I'm a political theorist and we have so many sort of artists talking about politics that maybe I should be talking about art for my entire talk. But fortunately, I think art's been pretty well covered, and I think there's been much better things said about art than anything I could come up with. So I think I'll stick with something I actually know something about, which is politics. The focus of my remarks is on a word that many people aren't familiar with, I think, which is the word sortition, which is the practice of selecting political officials or public officials at random, selection via lottery. And this is a very old democratic idea. It's about as old as democracy itself. I could talk about the history, but in the interests of time, I won't get into that. Instead, in keeping with the theme of the afternoon, I'm going to try to answer very briefly three questions. One, what does random selection do? Two, what can random selection contribute to democracy? And three, how will random selection help us as we rethink democracy in the future? And hopefully, if my talk succeeds, you will agree that, even if you haven't heard about sortition before, you will agree that it's a word that's likely to get talked about more in the future, and that that's probably a good thing for democracy, that will benefit if there is more discussion about sortition. So let me start by talking about what does random selection do. This was the focus of my first book, The Luck of the Draw, which was mentioned before. I forgot to bring a copy with it, but it is still in print and it is still available in fine bookstores everywhere. Please look it up. And in that book, I examined the various uses for random selection for all kinds of decisions. And for purposes here, I want to focus on two of the properties that random selection has. They're very closely interrelated. In fact, they're both intimately bound up with the definition of randomness. And they can each make a different kind of contribution to democracy. And so if once you recognize it can make different kinds of contributions, then you can have a conversation about, well, which ones are the really important ones. So random selection does two things that are closely interlinked, yet they're somewhat paradoxical. On the one hand, random selection makes sure that in any individual decision you make, the decision is unpredictable. That's sort of built into the definition. You do not know what the outcome is going to be, and therefore you get unpredictability. The other interesting property about random selection is that when you are making a lot of decisions randomly, over time, you get very good predictability. In other words, if you toss a coin once, you have no reason for believing whether it will be heads or tails that will arrive. It's an unpredictable outcome. But if you toss a coin 1,000 times, you can be very confident that you will get about 500 heads and about 500 tails. The two outcomes will happen about half of the time. Reliably over time. That's just a simple property of statistics. It's a property of the central limit theorem. So over time you will get an enormous amount of predictability, even though with individual decisions you will get perfect unpredictability. And I should perhaps here mention before moving on, one of the things I do in my work is I try to distinguish random selection from some other things which I think it can very easily be confused, which I think have a very different logic to it. For example, the drawing of lots has often been associated in the past with divination, with appeals to God or to spirits or the like. You see that in the book of Acts when Judas's replacement in the apostles is selected by lot, and that is specifically an appeal to God to settle matters. And I think that even if it looks like random selection, it's very, very importantly different. It's kind of the equivalent of trying to get God on the cell phone or something like that. And I mean, the connection might not be very good, but you're actually appealing to somebody who you think knows an answer. And that's very different when you are appealing to a source and you think that there is nobody informing the choice, no one trying to give you an answer through that. It's a very important difference. And I talk about this and other things that are often confused with random selection in my work. But I'll leave it there and we can talk about it more if you like. So what can, that's all I'm going to say about what random selection can do. Now I want to talk specifically about what can random selection do for democracy. Well, random selection has been in the background for democracy for quite some time. In the Anglo-American world, it has been the method for jury selection for quite some time. But it's very much happening in the background. It's very much not even what in those countries people associate with democracy. But it is enjoying something of a resurgence right now. People are taking it seriously. They are using it in all kinds of experiments, many of them kind of small scale, that are designed to advise various kinds of policy-making decisions in various kinds of localities. You have the planning cells that Peter Biennial pioneered in Germany. You have the citizen juries that come out of Ned Crosby's work in the United States and that have been used very often in the UK and places like that. You have the deliberative opinion polls that James Fishkin at Stanford University has pioneered. So you have many of these kinds of experiments, and they're starting to actually be used in very consequential decision-making processes. I'll just mention two of them very briefly. One of them is their use in attempts at constitutional reform in Canada. In two different Canadian provinces, you have the British Columbia and you have Ontario, both of which considered reforms to their electoral systems, and they were not sure how to go about choosing one. And they convened these randomly selected citizen assemblies to try to examine the different electoral systems and make recommendations. Both times recommendations were made, and unfortunately the final decision was left to a referendum, and both times the decision failed in a referendum. And one can talk about the reasons why that happened. The other interesting case is the Irish Constitutional Convention that was convened only a few years ago, and that has led to a series of referenda in Ireland, the most famous of which I think to date is the referenda on same-sex marriage, which passed overwhelmingly. But the origin for that was in a citizen jury that was a citizens' constitutional assembly that was a combination of randomly selected citizens and professional politicians coming together to discuss possible ways to amend the Irish Constitution. So there's more and more of this interest in using random selection. So what are the things random selection can do for democracy? I'm going to talk about two things that it might do. And you might like one of them, you might like both of them, you might not like either of them, but I think it's important to keep straight that they are two very distinct contributions to democracy. One of them stems from the fact that random selection is, in the short term, unpredictable. In fact, that's what characterizes it. If on any one individual decision, the outcome is unpredictable. And one of the things that this does is to sanitize decision-making. It keeps various kinds of bad reasons from affecting the decision, because, of course, if it's made randomly, no reasons can affect the decision. And so if you are very worried about bad reasons in the decision-making process, that's a good reason to use random selection. And so in particular, for example, when you are very concerned with factors such as corruption or domination, as we often are in the political process. If you're concerned about certain interests trying to control the various public decision-making bodies, if you're concerned about them being, taking them and perverting them for their own ends, well, one obvious way to prevent them from doing this is to prevent them from gaining control over the process that selects these officials. And if they're selected randomly, of course, that gives them no possible means of placing their, people on there who are subordinate to their will. So it can keep various kinds of corruption and domination from affecting the process that selects political officials. And so if these are factors that concern you, that's one reason to consider sortition. The other thing that sortition is very good at is ensuring over time, or even at one time, what's sometimes called a descriptive representation. And this is the famous idea that if you use random selection to select a group of officials, not one official, but a group of officials, the group of officials will in effect be a mirror to the larger public. If you randomly select representatives, then half of those representatives will almost certainly be women. You will see different racial groups, different religious groups, ethnic groups, religious groups, all will be represented proportionately to their place in the population. If the group is 5%, there'll be 5% of the randomly selected body, and so on and so forth. And this will be the case very reliably as long as the group is fairly large. If you need to get a couple of hundred, but if you're willing to get together that many people, you can ensure that the group is a mirror, is a microcosm of the larger public. And this is just an appeal to the other property of random selection I mentioned, that random selection gives you a great deal of predictability over a large number of decisions. And there are other possible contributions that random selection can make to democratic decision-making. I will stick with those two just in the interests of time. So I want to then conclude by talking about the third answer, the third question, which is how will sortition make us to rethink democracy? And I think this is one of the good things about sortition. There was an American politician who was confronted with the idea about using random selection in politics, and her response was that the idea was at first thought absurd and at second thought obvious. And I think that is very much the way it works. There's something, as weird as it seems, there is something intuitively attractive about it. But like a lot of intuitively attractive ideas, the challenge is to think through the intuition and to see how does it fit together with our other ideas. And in this regard, I think random selection poses a very stark challenge because it is so very different from many of the other ideas that we associate with democracy. So figuring out how does random selection fit with democracy and with other things that we associate with democracy is therefore an enormous challenge. And I'll give you two examples of that challenge that I think are being addressed right now by people who are very concerned about sortition and interested in advocating it. And so let me start by as one example of where we need to, I think, rethink democracy. Consider the first argument that I gave you for rethinking thinking about using random selection, the argument about the prevention of corruption and domination. Random selection is very attractive in this regard if you want to keep certain kinds of bad reasons out of the process of selecting officials. But the obvious problem is it's also very good at keeping out good reasons for selecting officials. That's also part of what it does. You can't really get the one without getting the other. If you are concerned about expertise, for example, well, unless you have pre-screened the pool already to make sure that you're only randomly selecting among experts, you're not going to be able to get expertise guaranteed in there. It's also, I mean, if you care about public opinion, I mean, of course, the whole purpose of holding elections is to say that, well, the people who are getting in are the ones who have the popular ideas, and this ensures that, guess what, it doesn't matter if you're popular or not, you're going to get on there anyway, you know, so if you consider these concerns like expertise or popular support to be good reasons to putting someone on there, well, random selection works against that. And this suggests that random selection is particularly good where there are certain kinds of decisions. And I want to stress, I think that there are some people who really want random selection to be used all over the place. I think there are certain particular roles that is very important. For one thing, it is best when we have roles that one might consider public roles that are non-political in some sense. Now that's a controversial kind of a term. Not, you know, what counts as political and what does not count as a political kind of a role. But there is this idea that there are some decisions that it is reasonable for us to fight, some kind of decision it is reasonable for us to fight about in the public space, and others where perhaps they're not supposed to be political issues. I mean, that's, I think, one of the major problems ailing my home country, the United States, is the fact that all kinds of decisions that frankly shouldn't be political are political. The President of the United States can't actually get up and tell school children that they should study hard and stay in school and try to go to university, and without people going crazy, a large number of people going crazy about that. His wife can't tell children that they should eat more vegetables and avoid fatty foods without people going crazy and thinking he's trying to set up some kind of fascist police state or something like that because he's trying to brainwash our kids or something. So that's, I think, one way of saying that there's all kinds of things that frankly shouldn't be political decisions have become political decisions. If you wanted to ask me what kind of decisions I think are perhaps best for the most obvious cases for where random selection is appropriate, they would be, the phrase I have used sometimes is there are certain kinds of roles that are important as guardians of the political system. They're the kind of roles that are designed to make sure that the political process works smoothly and democratically. For example, who is it that writes the rules for ethics that govern politicians? Right now it's politicians, and not surprisingly those rules don't work very well much of the time. What if you had randomly selected pools of people who were responsible for writing those codes, of ordinary citizens to write the codes and then to enforce those codes on politicians? That might be a non-political task, but it's a task of extreme importance to the political system. Policing the electoral process, making sure that the process is working smoothly, that the votes are being counted fairly. Essentially important, but again, in a sense, non-political in an important role. And again, I think there is a good role for random selection in such things. I'll just mention one other challenge that's posed by random selection. Random selection poses for democracy, and that relates to the other reason for considering random selection. It's this idea of descriptive representation, this idea that it's a way of generating groups of people that are a mirror of the broader population. Well, it's an attractive idea. There's something, I think, for many people have the intuition that says, our legislature or other decision-making bodies should look like the broader people in some sense, that there's something democratic about that. But of course, that is an image of democracy that fits very poorly with the other idea we have about democracy, which is, well, it should be the people who the people choose. On the one hand you say, well, this group is democratic because it looks like the broader population, and on the other hand you say, oh no, it should look democratic because they're the ones that the people chose. And those ideas do not fit together very well. You sort of have to decide, do you want the one and do you want the other? I think many of our debates about representation are flawed because we can't quite make up our mind which one we want, and so we try to have two things at once that we cannot have. The other, I'll just close with this observation, is it also might be a problem when you have societies that are suffering from deep divisions of various kinds. After all, one of the things that random selection does is ensure that if you happen to be a minority in the population, you're going to be a minority on the randomly selected body. And so that can cause problems where there are majorities and there are minorities that don't get along very well. I mean, in the country I live right now, in Ireland, this is an ongoing problem with the 6 counties we have to the north. In Northern Ireland, where you have a very deep divide between the Catholic and the Protestant communities. And one of the things that we are exploring right now, me with a group of other researchers, is the ways that sortition might be adapted to that kind of context, because you don't want it to be straight, well, we'll take a random sample and we'll just let them decide, because of course it's going to probably be a Protestant majority, and they probably might just wind up just doing something that completely ignores the Catholic minority. So how does one deal with random selection in those kind of contexts? It's tricky, because the nice idea of, we will get descriptive representation doesn't do everything that we would like it to do in those kind of contexts. So I think that solving these kind of problems is going to take a lot of very hard work, but I think actually that kind of work is worth it, because based on what I've said to you, I think there are very good reasons why sortition should become a part of our democratic practice, and therefore deserves more attention in the future.
Thank you a lot. I would like to ask you one question, and that is related to the party system, because of course it's not just I think a problem of corruption, but as well an enormous, you could say, waste of energy to try to be popular, of time and of money, and you could save completely on that with sortition. What do you think?
Well, I think that one of the big problems, I think, in politics is that, and again, it's a case of wanting two different things at once, is that you want politicians to be able to do like big things and get big things accomplished, but you don't want people to like fight all that hard about the elections. You know, it's like, let's just keep it casual. It's like, well, if you have huge stakes, people are going to fight really hard for them, you know, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people in political science have said that, you know, often if you're going to get stable democracies, sometimes you have to, in some forums, you have to lower the stakes a little bit. You have to say, okay, we're not going to fight about everything right now, because if we do that, we're going to fight with everything we've got, and maybe we don't want to do that. That's dangerous, destructive, as you say. It's also certainly wasteful, even in small contexts. So I think it is a question of figuring out, how important are these decisions, and therefore how much energy is it worth expending on them? Because fighting too much can be very wasteful and also very destructive.
Well, I have a question. Well, I don't have a question. I have a kind of a question. I have a kind of a question, a semi-question, a quasi-question. The quasi-question is, I understand the principle of arriving at a more democratic result in terms of representation through the fact of sortition, because it avoids all the struggles of fighting and all that, and competition over ideas and so forth. But two things. One is, you said it doesn't work well where there are minorities, because they might be excluded definitively, and I actually don't know a place in the world without minorities. So that's one point. And the second question is, can it work, given that there's a parallel system of power, which is not that of the so-called political officials, which is the system of power installed by the economic divides and the economic power forces, you know, the corporations and so on. And those they're not being run by sortition. So if we just unilaterally accept sortition in the political representation, but not impose it also in the governance of corporations, might not work. So we might have to do like a double whammy revolution.
Well, I believe Michael Lerner, political activist in the United States and a writer, has suggested the idea of something like corporate oversight boards, selected randomly from ordinary citizens, with something like a sort of some kind of an oversight kind of role. There are certain kinds of structural economic problems that, you know, of course, sortition is, you know, no better than any other democratic process we have of necessarily resisting. I mean, you know, it is, I think, tricky to figure out which are the decisions, like, you know, being a country that has to worry about problems like capital flight and currency and that kind of thing, which are just very hard to solve, from the problems where you say, okay, look, this looks like a problem of political will. This looks like a problem that just means that you can't get the political class to do it. And that's often, those are often the kinds of decisions where I think sortition is often, is very good. It is a sort of a bypass around the political class in that regard. So to the extent that you think that the problem is caused by the fact that the political class, it's deeply bound up with those economic interests, it's corrupted by those economic interests, it's just, and for that reason it's simply not being democratic enough. It is a way of getting around that.
Yeah, okay. Last question.
There was one thing that I was wondering that I thought you might touch on, and I guess it's similar to Carolyn's question in terms of thinking about oversight of corporations, but I was wondering about the military, because the military is clearly an area in which there is a requirement for a degree of expertise, and also the individuals that are entering power through the democratic process are also kind of taught how to negotiate that balance of power with their military. And I just wondered, in terms of your research, where that functions, because there's one thing electing officials, who know how to deal with that situation, and a group of randomly selected people who are basically lambs to the slaughter in the context of the military?
It's a good question. I mean, of course, if you go back to the very first use of sortition in Athens, the generals were among the few offices that were elective offices, because they said there is a matter of expertise there. And I think that is one of the standard concerns that's raised about sortition, is that if you have amateurs who are against professionals, which is often the kind of conflict, not just with the military, but with sort of the bureaucracy more generally, would they be up to the task? And it's a real kind of a concern. One of the things I'm very interested in exploring is the way that where sortition has been used in the past, the idea was that it would work very well when you can ensure the right level of competition in other areas of the political system, not in the sortition part, but in other parts of the system. And this, I guess, kind of relates to the question about like the wastefulness of conflicts, because some kind of conflicts are kind of productive. I mean, if all of the politicians or all of the generals and all of that are speaking as one, you're kind of out of luck. But what if one sort of faction of powerful people, one general wants one thing and another general wants another thing, and they're going to sort of have to get to, and they both then sort of need now the support of ordinary citizens to get what they want. Now there's a kind of a situation where, okay, the power balance is a little different. And I think that when you look at the sort of democratic states that have relied on sortition, and Athens, I think, is essentially, in my mind, it's been very good at not just using sortition and getting its virtues, but also encouraging just the right level and the right amount of competition among the other sorts of political and economic elites, so that it wasn't the case of you've got this unified force that the randomly selected citizens have to push against.
Thank you. Thank you. So, next.
Thank you.
Yes. Ben, yeah? Ben, it's you.